Before I start the questions and answers session, I'll tell a few words about how the program will be. So we will have every day except for Sundays, a new session will be released, and it will be a short session. My goal is to make it practical, maybe 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes maximum, to do a daily practice. And we'll be breaking down these movements that we did today, introducing new things. And then we meet again on Monday next week. We continue with a 90-minute session. We'll do the full lesson. Still a little bit anatomy, a little bit of learning components. And you will have another 2 weeks, except for Sundays, of daily small work. We are going to, I've worked, part of my rehabilitation journey was studying with Dr. Hans Kraus. And he had a fantastic model for restoring homeostasis by progressing from relaxation first, through limbering, meaning pain-free mobility, to stretching, and finally to strengthening. He understood how important the first components, that many people who go aggressively after the stretch fail because they are trying to stretch tissues that need to stop contracting. And stretching will not do that. Stretching may feel good for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe you're a little bit more limber for an hour and two. The next day, everything is the same. So what we need to do is reprogram, stop unnecessary contractions in our muscles. So we will do plenty of relaxation, but at the same time, we're not going to just relax. We will introduce lengthening and working on endurance and strength. So that's what awaits us. Make sure that all the exercises, all the movements are comfortable for you, that you don't push, you don't forcefully strive, and do small improvements every day. Now, questions and answers. Don, you have your hand, so please unmute yourself and I'll try to answer. I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
How are you?
Good.
One of the things I have a really hard time sensing is working, that my hamstrings are working when I'm standing up and just bend forward, you know, the test. Where I stand up and move forward. If I'm lying on the floor and raise my legs, I feel they're working. If I'm working it where the leg is moving, I have a sense that they're working. When I'm moving my body, I don't know where the work is coming from.
Yeah, fantastic question, Don. This is like one of the reasons why we do this whole workshop, because a lot of people will have the same. Lifting the leg, not as difficult, but leaning forward requires, that's why you have to go beyond limitations of dualistic thinking, that is either flexibility or strength. When you lean forward, your hamstring muscles have to contract and get longer at the same time. That's called eccentric contraction of the muscle. If you think what eccentric, we'll talk about this during our meetings, but briefly, concentric action of the muscle is when I'm curling my bicep. I'm bringing weight toward my head or toward my shoulder. You can imagine my bicep is contracting, getting shorter. This is called concentric. Muscle works, contracts, and gets shorter. Now, if I'm lowering now weight slowly, my bicep is elongating. But at the same time, I don't want to just shut it off because it will be a pow, sudden snap. I want to control that. So this is what happens when you are leaning forward, when you're standing, and if you need to curl forward and go down, your hamstring need to yield gradually, elongate, but at the same time, it shouldn't collapse all the way because then you fall. So the issue that many of us have with this movement is balance, difficulty learning how to do eccentric contraction, because at every moment that muscle has to get longer, 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 and not suddenly let go or suddenly stop. So the issue there, I would say, is not as much of flexibility as the eccentric control. And we'll be doing these movements. We will be doing plenty of opportunities to learn it. So I don't know if I answered you, but I told you why you're having the problem.
Yeah, no, I finally understand this eccentric movement. It's just feeling it is still at a loss.
If you want to feel really miserable, stand next to the wall with your buttocks on the wall and try to touch your toes. You will say like, whoa, I'm falling. Only people who can do really well this movement of folding can do this movement where you're standing with your back touching the wall and fold yourself forward. Part of it is, of course, because the seat bones also are pushing into the wall, and that throws you forward. And then what happens? You start to clench with the ball of the foot and toes down because you're falling on your face, right? So that's what many of us experience even without the wall. You lean forward and gripping. I'm falling. So therefore the hamstring muscles will concentrically contract and stop you from going. Yeah. When you fall forward, the whole nervous system say, wait a minute, we can fall on the face. Boom, stop. Tenses up and limits, and you cannot go any further. So yes, we are going to address it. John, you're next. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, great, thanks. I have a question. When I'm doing the toe touching, generally, I feel it in the really, really low back, like the sacroiliac or whatever's down there.
Mm-hmm.
And if I bend my knees, whatever, then I can get a little bit lower. But a lot of times when I'm doing the stretching to touch the toes or that way, I feel everything all the way down into my calves.
Uh-huh.
And is that the sciatic nerve? Is that just
it could be. That's where I would say when you do those tests, or when we will do, because a lot of people, when trying to stretch, put excessive bending in the lumbar spine or sacroiliac, sacrolumbar junction. We don't want too much movement there. Majority of population of the world now, I would say, have too much movement there and not enough movement of hinging in the hip joints. So when you're doing these movements, I would say stay on the cautious side and do less. Instead of leaning far forward, like with what we just did today, I would say kitchen counter or even higher shelves. So you're barely instead of leaning like that far, start from just there and just small movements. So you're starting to learn how to hinge the hips. We will do some movements where you are rocking your pelvis in sitting position. Just sit on the front edge of the seat, please, for now. And see if you can bring yourself a little bit forward and back without bending your spine. No spinal motion at all. If you can sense movement of the pelvis in your hip joints. If you open your knees even wider and hips even wider, you're making room for your belly, for the pubic area to come forward more. You most likely will feel a little bit more easier, kind of like a sumo squat coming forward. So I would say stay with these movements more than huge bending and arching and bending and arching, because repetitive movement in places where we move too much is just going to make you sore. It increases danger of herniating disc, but even without that, your brain will say, stop this movement. You're moving too much. And what will happen is it will give you spasms in the lower back, and you will feel, oh, my back is so tight. And the crazy thing is that when we feel tightness, we think I need to stretch because I'm so tight. And your brain is trying to prevent you from moving there, but then you feel like, oh, I'm so tight, I need to stretch. No, you don't stretch. Please never stretch.
Okay,
Great question.
great, thank
Kathy,
you.
you're next. Please unmute yourself. Okay.
Yes, I just had two questions. The first one was just anatomical that I thought I just want to make sure I'm remembering your diagrams. The lateral hamstring does have an attachment below the knee to your tibia.
Fibula. Yeah.
And there's nothing on the medial side. So when I did the windshield wiper,
no, there is.
I felt the medial side have a problem, feel constricted and not as smooth as the lateral. That was just from the belly, the hamstring muscle above the knee on the inner thigh.
Both, not only outside have attachment, both attach to below the knee joint. I'm pulling the diagram now so we can see.
Okay.
Biceps femoris. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Here we go.
I came in late also, so maybe I didn't see it.
So you didn't see it. Okay. I will show it to you because it's so beautiful to watch. Stop share. Where am I sharing? Sharing now. Here. So if we zoom out a little bit.
Yeah. Strip away.
Yeah. So you have on the inside muscles that go below the knee joint. Let's go to movement.
Okay. So one of the three hamstrings are going to, and then
all
two on the
four.
other side.
All four go. Even the short head. The short head is now in orange.
Okay.
It doesn't go above to the hip joint, but the short head that starts somewhere on the ridge of the femur, but still merges in with the tendon of this long head of bicep, bypass the knee and attach to the fibula here. On the inside, same idea.
Okay.
On the inside, they go even further down and attach. Let's straighten the leg a little bit. Straightening. Let's rotate it. They attach to the front of the shin in a place called spes anserina on the front.
Okay. So you can get some shortening into your calf.
That's
also.
right. That's right. That's right. And another place, and we are not going to only work the hamstrings, we are going to also work on the calves because as you can see, they kind of overlap. One group, and then here you have the gastrocnemius muscle that goes up and attaches on femur above. And if you touch the back of the knee, it's so bunched up with between the hamstring, two hamstrings, and the calf muscles.
Okay, I appreciate that because if I can visualize it, then and feel it.
Yeah, I love theory. There is nothing more practical than good theory.
Okay. All right. My second question was regarding the concentric movements. When we were sitting and I raised my left knee, and I was trying to find whether it was sciatic or hamstring tightness, I did feel some involvement, maybe some numbness down into my left pinky, like on the lateral side of my foot. It wasn't, could it be a combination of both or a different?
No, it could be very much the sign of some sciatic impingement. So when you're doing it, make it very gently. There is actually the way to treat sciatic impingement, especially chronic, not acute. If it's all like red hot inflamed, you just don't mess with this. You give the body, you restore homeostasis. But let's say you've had some issues for months and it's way past the acute stage and you are feeling quite good, but with certain movement that thing speaks to you. We do something that's called mobilization of nerves, flossing, nerve flossing. and you use movements, even the movements that I showed you with that slump test, to actually do a little bit of the sciatic nerve pulling. So if there is some impingement, it can gently, skillfully, by just going to the edge of the discomfort, backing off a little bit and then giving it a break, you can free it up in the long term. So don't be afraid of it, but if there is some big numbing, painful, then definitely don't do it. Nothing should be uncomfortable or painful. And
Could
even
you
with the nerve,
imagine it instead of even if the flossing technique is an issue, could you imagine it?
well, the flossing technique will be definitely an issue, but I would say if you do a movement that is creating pain, see if instead of leaning that much forward, you could change the angle and do it less. Instead of doing the full cat back, you do first 10% of it, tiny, like this, like that, like this, like instead of like going up and down with a huge.
Thank you.
Modulating the size. Thank you. Carol, you're next. I'm asking to unmute.
Hi,
Hi.
thanks. So I had a question about when we were doing the test of sciatica and lifting our knee, right, our leg, and then bending our knee. Is it important how, or I had a hard time lifting my knee more than, I don't know, 8 inches off the floor. I couldn't get it up as high as my hip joint. And does that matter? And is that where there's a tight hamstring or just?
That could be because of weakness of the quadricep. If you feel like really big burning of the quad in front, because what happens with the kicking movement, concentrically your quadricep is contracting, hamstring needs to get longer, elongate, and it has to stop contracting or at least yield. If that doesn't happen, it could be weakness of the quad. It could be shortness of the hamstring muscles. So, but that's okay.
Right, and playing with it means just do it small.
Just doing
as much
small.
as you can lift your heel off the floor, and then.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this course because I will be recording the videos and I'll be doing these things with you together. And when I was doing it yesterday, the films for the testing, I could see like, oh, my knee doesn't straighten fully, a little bit tugging, a little bit pulling. So it's fine to have some limitations. Just don't be aggressive with it.
Good, thank you.
Give yourself plenty of time. Super. Vera, you're next.
Yes, I have a couple of questions, Mira.
Sure.
One is, are any of these contraindicated for osteoporosis? And if so, are you going to mention it, or do I have to be vigilant?
Yeah, I would, but in general, forward bending. So therefore, with slump test, yes, you do a little bit of slumping and rounding. So if there is a severe osteoporosis, probably don't do it. This is more the slump test I shown for people who have history of sciatic nerve problems, just to make them aware that it might not only be hamstring that limits your extension. It's not like everybody should. This for most people here, I think it will be just a curiosity thing. For people who have numbness or tingling or had sciatic in the past, and they are trying to do these stretches, I want to alert them that don't do things that tugs and yanks on the sciatic nerve. Be mindful, decrease the size of movement, and you don't have to do it. It's like, not like I would want you to do slump test every day. This is what I do only at the initial sessions when I'm trying to be a detective and find out where is the problems, where is the person's problem. So, but in general, I'll try to be mindful, but anytime we do any folding forward, big rounding, like bringing chin to chest, doing, like, for example, my flexion course that I taught, probably will not be an ideal place. Although I know people who have osteoporosis who did it and loved it, but they know how to work with themselves. They know when to stop, when they don't feel frustrated, where 40 minutes of the lesson is practically impossible for them, and they just need to sit and imagine and do a little bit and tiny.
And my other, I don't know if it's a question or comment, you were describing who the people were taking the course. And I didn't quite fit into any of those. I have extremely long limbs, so I look like I'm doing everything with no effort, but I never get the full range of motion, and I'm asymmetrical. So I was tempted to do this to see if I can extend my range of motion so I'm not cheating.
On one side, okay.
And to be symmetrical, because on one side I'm always lopsided no matter what I do. So I have to be really mindful. So that was my motivation.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And you can feel free to do movements on one side more than on the other if we're doing them. Yeah, and but also most people are lopsided. I am lopsided, so I don't think you will find perfect symmetry. It doesn't exist. Even in anatomy, you look at the heart, it lies on the left side. Right lung is bigger than the left. Body feature, one breast is bigger than the other. How can you be symmetrical? Liver is on one side and on the other. Use this huge organ on one side, on the other. So perfect symmetry is a trap of a mind sometimes. But you want to be able to do whatever you want to do. And if you find that mobility is limiting you, welcome, you're in a good place.
Well, I'm a skier, so I'm overcoming all of the things that that one would say you shouldn't be doing any of the above. But that's why I wanted to do this, to see if I can.
Why not? Why not?
Thank
Nice.
you.
You're
So
next.
I'm looking forward to.
Happy to have you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hey there.
I just have a question. What does it mean when you feel that the medial hamstrings are a little sore? Not from what you do. It does not limit the movement, but it started almost feel like it's below the knee by where the insertion is to the tibia. And then you run along it, and if you just tender up muscle belly, is it overstretched?
It could be a sign of overworked. It could be also adductor muscles, the inner thigh muscles, because they can run all the way down there. It could be that those muscles are guarding. For example, when I had my ACL troubles, my inner hamstring was working so hard to hold the knee from, I wouldn't dare to do the windshield wiper outward because it felt like my joint will pop. So the only comfortable place for me for quite a long time, for months, was actually to pigeon toe, to turn the foot a little bit inward. When I was doing that, my inner hamstring was always vigilantly contracting. So therefore it was sore. So I would say most often is the sign of overwork, overuse. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a tight place. When I have an argument against myself in the past and many clinicians who would, like, in massage, you go and somebody touches you and somebody tells you, oh, you're really tight, aren't you? Can you feel how tight you are? That, I think, is no good. It's no good for our body image to carry it with it. And often when you actually palpate the tissues, I find that often tissues are more painful in the places that they feel softer than tighter. So that whole model that, oh, that's tight and we need to untighten it. Sometimes it's not quite that. You touch something and the person jumps off your table and say, whoa, that's a trigger point. And you look at this texture, it can be actually kind of like a little hollowy, flubby, disengaged fibers of normal recruitment. So I would be cautious with labeling that this is one thing or another thing. But if one particular muscle tends to be sore, I think it's working a little too hard.
Now, to go in with your walking lessons, I found that I think maybe I'm pronating my right foot, this is my right side, more than supinating. And if I catch myself walking, taking my walk, and I feel this little pang there, if I try to supinate, and put more weight on my outside edge of my foot, it kind of minimized that discomfort.
So very interesting, because here you have that rotation of the knee. Yeah, when you supinate, you're actually lessen tug of the inner thigh muscle. When you pronate, maybe that internal rotation of the knee, the hamstring working a little too hard on that inner portion, is contributing to your tibia turning in, which goes also with pronating, with flattening the foot. Love that. Beautiful job being aware and sensing and noticing difference.
It's just because taking all these classes, I just mix everything together.
You see, I brainwash you. I'm so happy. Nikki, you're next. So we have two more questions, Peter and Nikki. Nikki first.
Thank you for making everything beautifully clear as usual.
Thank you.
I did the lesson with, my modifications, but I wanted to ask you, could you please repeat the Hans Kraus steps again? I know, stop the contraction.
Relaxation. First, always start with relaxation. And that may mean 2 weeks of work or with somebody, like people, especially people who are over eager to go into stretching or strengthening. No, chill, quiet, touch, breathe, put some heat on it, hot compress or something, soft and quiet, release. Relaxation, first step. Second step, limbering. It's a funny word. Whenever I type limbering in my notes, it corrects me, auto-corrects lumbering. And then I have to overcorrect. No, limbering. I really meant it. Limbering means pain-free range of motion. So not going to the end range, not pushing, but starting to mobilize. And that mobilization early on. He actually learned it from a circus. He was a physiatrist. He was a surgeon. He's considered a father of physiatry and sports medicine. And he learned it from a circus master who was a friend of Hans Kraus, and his name was Kowalski. And Kowalski told Hans, you doctors, you surgeons have it all wrong. You immobilize people. When I land wrong in my circus act and I have a swelling and inflammation, the last thing I want is to immobilize, to put it in the cast, because I have a performance tomorrow. I have to be ready tomorrow. And he showed him how to go to sauna with alcohol wrapped bandage around the injured part, which is evaporated quickly, cooling down, and very gently mobilizing without pain. So he adopted that, and he created that whole progression. Relax first, restore free, limbering range of motion. Then you go to stretching and finally strengthening.
Great.
And in the hamstring course, I will mix them up a little bit, because otherwise we will spend first 2 weeks just on the relaxing and you will be too bored. And I do believe we can safely introduce certain, if it's not excessive, it can be done well, kind of intertwining all four.
I don't have a huge problem with tight hamstrings, but
but it's not only on tightness. We are going to work a lot on eccentric control, the thing that Don asked and Vera asked of how to lean forward and control movements. There'll be plenty of work on that.
And strengthening, of course.
Thank you. So that's strengthening. Peter.
One of the early slides was labeled landing from a jump. Can you talk a little more about that? And does that apply to squats?
Absolutely. And I will talk about this in length. I'll show the slide one more time, but I'll talk about it quite a bit in the next session. So let me go play from the start. Not this. Yeah. So here we have the landing from the jump. Like, what's advised is to be on the right-hand side. This landing like this is activating hamstring muscles. Being upright is activating anterior chain, meaning front of the body, quadricep driven landing, bending, squatting. So this way of squatting, or even getting up from a chair, if you're not into exercise, and if you try to get up from a chair, actually do it right now. Sit on the front edge of the chair and try to keep yourself erect, like the picture on the left here. Feel how much your quads are dominant. They're dominating the activity. In some way, you feel a little stiff because you're holding yourself upright, your neck in front gets stiffer, your abdomen gets stiffer, and you lift yourself up. Do the movement of forward bending, and I would say not with the neck arching like she's doing here, but actually looking down to the floor and leaning forward and standing up. See if you can feel that the work is distributed. Actually do this. Not just you, Peter, but the rest of the stuff. I see everybody is looking. Do this. Stand upright. Get yourself upright to standing by holding the torso excessively upright, and feel how your quads are firing mainly. Compare that with bowing forward, leaning forward, hinging in the hip joints, coming forward. That doesn't mean rounding yourself, but leaning forward like a skier that comes forward toward down the slope, and then lift up. Can you feel your quad works less? Glutes and hamstrings are firing more. And do one and one. Touch your hands, place your hands on the quads, keep yourself excessively upright and stand up. Feel how quads fire underneath your hands. Good. Now go forward and keep your hands still on the quads and feel they will work less. But if you place your hands now behind your knees, feel when you go this way, bowing forward, how they contract when you go into this athletic stance. And that athletic stance, it's not only for jumps, like I put that slide to show people who are at risk of ACL tears because they're landing from the jumps or in athletics activities. They land a little bit too stiffly on too upright body. You can even see that the land is like that kind of vibrates rather than folding, unfolding, folding, unfolding. But that applies to washing hands. That applies to picking up the toilet seat. Or low, if you follow the guy who didn't drop the toilet seat down, you have to put it down. You have to use your hamstring. You see, that mechanism of lowering the seat slowly was probably invented because of hamstring weakness. Because in order to bend forward like this, washing hands, vacuuming, doing things that we do thousands of times a day requires good control and strength of hamstrings. And if we don't have it, we cheat. We stay too upright. We collapse our hip to the side. We jut one side of the pelvis. We do all sorts of things.
I find that when I do squats, when I follow the position on the right, where you put your torso down and you keep your shins vertical, that I find less pressure on my knees.
Oh, yes. Because it actually applies pressure on the ACL if you do it too upright, too stiffly.
Thanks.
You're welcome. I will see you tomorrow for the video recording, and I'll see you live next week. Thanks for your attention.